Here on this Wednesday, this midweek point of Advent Week 1, we turn to Matthew chapter 15 and verse 29. I hope that you've already discovered personally and as a church how we're going to pray that this season of hope and waiting for the appearing of Jesus and the longing of our hearts might be expanded. But there are many other themes that have already begun to emerge. And don't get overwhelmed. Maybe allow yourself to see how many there are. And or at the same time, if you feel the Spirit of God wants to emphasize one to you, do drop anchor at that point. So here in Matthew 15, remember Matthew writing to Jewish folk who have found that Jesus is indeed truly their Messiah. And Jesus in Matthew 15 had been walking outside Jewish territory. Terrible. What an awful thing to do. Except, of course, that the gospel is for all, and that was the call that God gave to his ancient people. Now, as he comes back and goes to that southwestern corner of the lake, the Sea of Galilee, Jesus goes up a mountain and he sits down. Now, what's the mountain? Place of revelation. God's going to speak. Jesus is speaking. He's speaking today. He still speaks through his word. It's revealing. Not new, but in continuity. And crowds approach him and they bring the lame, the blind, the crippled, the mute, and many others. And they bring them to his feet. Feet. The place where we worship and bow down. And Jesus heals them. Now, this is not to show off about signs and wonders. This is about promise and fulfillment. Take Isaiah, our brother. Isaiah had prophesied those centuries before that when the Messiah comes, he would do certain activities. So these are activities of the Messiah. And these activities point to who Jesus is. Yes, he's healing. And look at this in verse 31. And they glorified the God of Israel. So those outside Israel are beginning to see that the God of Israel is the true God. Jesus is the one true God and fully man. Glory to the God of Israel. There's a whole teaching in that. And then we have the feeding of the 4,000. But the 4,000, just look at all the things in here. 4,000, 7, satisfaction. Jesus feeding outside the camp. There's another theme. And all satisfied. Notice again, please. Compassion and willingness, provision and bounty, and God's concern for real people. So, in this midpoint of Advent 1, as we look forward to the hope, these folk who were healed, the Messiah who stood amongst them, some of us, well, no, not some of us, all of us will have areas in our life where we will, quotes, limp into heaven. But here's the joy in the fullness of that which is to come. We may limp into, but we will not limp in. For in the kingdom fulfilled, there is no sickness. There is no sin. And there is no independence of how I shall live my life. For we shall all reign fully with great joy under the reign and in the reign of King Jesus. Take your time. So much in this passage.